Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I'm Christina Omari, one of the co-founders of BuildUp, along with my co-founder Wayne Sutton, who's going to be moderating the event tonight, and our other co-founder Christian Anderson, who was able to be with us this evening. I definitely want to welcome you all to tonight's event. I know it's going to be a very special discussion. And I also want to thank our sponsors. Obviously, Google is hosting us tonight. We're very happy to have their sponsorship, and Caribbean Innovation Ventures. So I'd like to bring up Sonja Sulcer, who is the founder of Caribbean Innovation Ventures. She's passionate about inspiring individuals from the Caribbean diaspora to maximize their potential as innovators and entrepreneurs. So Sonja, please give us a few words. Thank you.
So thanks, Christina. As Christina said, my name is Sonja Sulcer, and I started Caribbean Innovation Ventures to basically tell the stories of Caribbean entrepreneurs, as well as to provide them with access to capital and educational resources. When my husband and I moved here several years ago, no one was thinking about the Caribbean, or they would only think about Bob Marley and great beaches and marijuana. Well, that's a business now, but but I wanted to make sure that with all the diversity and everything that was happening, that the Caribbean wasn't going to be left out in this age. So just want to make it brief and thank Wayne for partnering with me on this event, and his team, and as well as to thank Chinedu for coming and speaking to us, and we are looking forward to hearing your words of wisdom, and to thank you for giving up your evening to be with us. So enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
Hello, hello. You said good evening? Harry, oh, wake up. Let's go. How you doing? Wow, I'm pleased to introduce Chinedu. And thanks for coming tonight, and really also thanks Christina and the build-up team, and Sonja and her husband Jarvis for partnering with us on this event. So Chinedu, people ready to bio your story. So what are you doing in Silicon Valley today?
Well, I was actually here at the Stanford School to speak to their ETL students. So Sonja invited me as well, and I thought this was a great opportunity to kind of share my story and kind of answer some of the questions you may have, and basically just connect and kind of give you any help or suggestions that I have I think is helpful.
That's great. We'll really appreciate it. Forbes named you one of the 10 most powerful men in Africa in 2014. That's big. That's big. So
yeah, it's big. So and that's the reason why you shouldn't. You shouldn't believe everything you read on the internet. I don't know why I was on that list, but obviously I'm honored to be on that list. And
yeah, it's cool. So let's talk about your journey. You're Nigerian born. You went to King's College, Syracuse University, Harvard. You became an analyst at J.P. Morgan, then AM Investment Partners, and then tech founder twice. So what makes you special? Like, what was the drive around education and mentorship, and like what made you decide just to take this path?
Well, the truth is I actually don't believe that anything that I've done is remarkable. I really don't. So I think I've been lucky and privileged, right, to come from a family that valued education to some extent, and then inspired me and supported me in that journey. But I honestly do believe that things are changing in the world. And because of technology and the amount of information that's currently available to everyone on the internet and etc., many of the things that we thought were extremely hard aren't as hard as you think. And if you simply went on YouTube and Googled Y Combinator or Googled Michael Skok at iLab, you'll find just so much information that's available to you to de-risk what most people think is this kind of messed, complicated process of being an entrepreneur. So I didn't have some of those resources and tools when I started the companies I started, and I really encourage all of you to really just spend time just thinking about entrepreneurship, thinking about, well, what ideas do you have? How do I even start? The whole process of even attempting to start will demystify some of the things you think are extremely challenging right now.
Yeah. So with that, you have two exits, amazing career, and we was talking outside how you're looking for great people, right? And to like really spend like almost human capital, right? Invest time with. Looking at your life and your journey, what would you tell yourself now, knowing what you know now that you didn't know when you started as being an entrepreneur?
So especially with tech companies, it's so easy to sort of look at the success stories and say, okay, this is something I want to do because there's all this kind of potential fame and wealth associated with the entrepreneurial process. But I actually think that's actually the wrong way to think about it, right? If your goal is to create wealth, entrepreneurship, in my mind, isn't it, right? So the success rates startups are really low. But if, on the other hand, you have a passion about creating things, about building companies, in forging, having a footprint in this world in terms of a problem you want to fix, then I would definitely encourage you to be an entrepreneur, because the journey is too long and the suffering too great to do it just for just for the hope of money.
Yeah. So mentors, advisors along the way, like what role did it play, and then like what was some key advice that they provided you?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and something that I really hope that you listen to what I have to say. So that's something I didn't have as an entrepreneur. I'm not sure if I'm just antisocial or I don't know what it is, right? But the early process for both companies were very difficult just because I didn't have the business and professional network that was needed to kind of raise capital, hire people, etc. Right? And for those of you who actually live in Silicon Valley, I would encourage you to literally have one meeting with someone you want to meet every single week. It is unbelievable how important it is for you to network. Not only network with each other, but also network with people who are players in whatever category, whether they're entrepreneurs or whether they're venture capitalists, whether they work for large companies. Those are the networks that will make opportunities available to you. Those are the networks that will introduce you to sources of capital who will then invest in you. And those are the people who will then connect you with the large strategic deal you need to be able to make your company successful. So I cannot emphasize enough the importance of building your own professional network, especially if you're based in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. So with that, you say you didn't have mentors and advisors, right? But you had two companies, both were acquired. And you was in part of the teams in the process of raising angel capital for those. What was that process like? Meeting those other investors, getting them to believe in like, hey, I'm the person to run this company.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and for me, I sort of locked out. So I was, it's that's what I mean by if you think entrepreneurship is about money, it's not, because it's about pain more than anything else, right? It's not only about pain, about figuring out how you pay rent and make payroll, but there's a social cost as well, right? So as you mentioned, I graduated from Harvard, and most obviously things have changed, right? But back then it was really investment banking and management consulting, etc. And so if you're 4 years into your journey and you're still figuring out how to like make your rent for the month, right? And your friends are in there, taking pictures in Tahiti, right? It's a really tough thing to do. So I would say that I was lucky to the extent that I found one investor, right? So I found one, and it was a pretty random story. So I attended one of those tech conferences, and I think I carried around my one-page business summary around. Then one investor came to my desk, right, and said, "Oh, what do you do?" I'm like, "Well, Top Stop, we give you bus and subway and bus directions in cities, etc." And he's like, "Okay, here's my business card." And then he called me. I think it was I can't remember what day it was, but he was based in New Jersey. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but basically to get to New Jersey, you have to take the train. It's just hard to get to. Then for one split second, I was like, oh, I thought about not going to that meeting, but for some reason I actually did, right? And it's through that meeting I got the very first $50,000 loan, which I needed to be able to upgrade the servers for HubSpot. Then that company then eventually invested much more into the company. But essentially, that was that one meeting that I needed to have gone to for HubSpot to be to have happened.
That's great. And you touched on something that the Build Up team and some other partners we've been talking about. The why is it valuable for entrepreneurs to get out, especially I think minority entrepreneurs, to get out of their comfort zone and go to some of these tech conferences, go to network events, to like build relationships and just be in the room and be part of the conversation. Because you put yourself in position to meet that investor. Then it was from there to follow up and let the product speak for itself.
Yes. So again, go to as many conferences as you can, kind of network, just understand the landscape. Because it's not rocket science. It really isn't. It's not something that is beyond any of us. So in addition to sort of the networking at conferences, etc., I think something that's even more important than that is to figure out how to actually work with people who are, if you want to be a tech entrepreneur, work with other tech entrepreneurs or work in companies or tech, because it's really it's a networked. That the way Silicon Valley works and the whole startup industry, it's about networks, about personal referrals. Like, I worked with this guy, he's a really great engineer. I worked with this guy, who's a great product manager. And those kinds of referrals don't happen if they just met you over cocktail, drinks, right? You actually have to have work experience or are engaged in some sort of way with other people, right? So they can get a sense of what you're about, what your skills are, what your passion is, what you're interested in. And it's because they feel confident in those skills and those attributes you have that they then eventually recommend you to someone else. They tell you about a new startup who they think you would work well with, right? So I think networking is great, but I think once you start networking, even if it's a part-time project, just engage with people, and you'll learn things, right? You'll start having real, tangible proof points in terms of what you're capable of doing and what your passion is. And those things are the things that would eventually drive you into the network. I wish it was different, and in my ideal world, it wouldn't be so hard to get into these networks. But the reality is that those networks do exist, and that's really where many of those decisions are currently made.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's switch gears right quick. And we're going to talk about Tripology. It sold to Rand McNally in 2010. Now it's owned by USA Today. Do you feel like that was a great exit? And what was the process like? Was it like, hey, we're ready to sell, or just the right time?
Yeah, the Tripology story was interesting because it was almost like the worst time to be doing a travel company, right? There was SARS. I mean, this was just a horrible time to yeah. So I'm happy that the team and the company landed in good hands. But timing does matter, right? Especially in things like that. So the story behind Tripology is I started the company with a Columbia Business School student who came to me and said he wanted to be an entrepreneur. It's like, listen, I have tons of ideas. Let's work on one. So Tripology, for those who don't know, is a lead generation company for travel. And what we do is essentially connect. What they do now, I guess, is that they connect customers or consumers with travel specialists who can help them plan the type of travel, right? So it's easy to get a flight and hotel on Expedia and Travelocity, but if you wanted to have an African safari or have a wine tour in Spain, for example, it's hard to find online. So what consumers will do, they'll indicate what they wanted to do, then we'll match them up with travel specialists who can then help them plan the trip. And the business model then was a lead generation model where we would essentially charge travel specialists for access to the details, the telephone number, email, etc. of the consumer. So that's how it happened. So we ended up, while I was CEO of HubSpot, we ended up raising some venture capital, and we hired a CEO to run the company. And so I wasn't actually a board member or employee of the company when the exit happened at that point. So I can't speak to actually details around it.
Well, you played a key role.
Well, I signed documents that said we can sell, but
yeah, awesome. And the one you know kind of most famous for, is Hopstop, and it sold to Apple, and there was various press, as we mentioned before, around that acquisition and so forth. Were you more involved in that process?
Yeah, so even in Hopstop's case, I left after 4 years of starting the company, and this is my own. This is me. It doesn't mean that it's the best situation for other entrepreneurs, but what I've found is that entrepreneurship isn't a cookie cutter kind of approach was entrepreneurship. I just know myself enough to know what I'm passionate about, what I'm good at, and what I'm interested in, and I've chosen to do precisely those kinds of things. And those, for me, entrepreneurship, the early years of the entrepreneurial process is a part that I get most excited about. Once you have a product and you have your metrics and it's about scaling, those aren't the types of business that I'm passionate about. It's not so. What I found, so in HubSpot's case, so even in HubSpot's case, we brought in a new CEO to run HubSpot, and he did a fabulous job. I think when I left HubSpot, we were in 20 or so cities. I think by the time the acquisition happened, I think we were in 200 or 300 cities. So it was a great decision from the board's perspective, from my perspective, to bring in someone who had a different skill set, and a different interest in growing the company. I personally found what I wanted to do is to repeat that process, to repeat that first 2 years of the company's growth.
A great point. You touched on something that, now I'm bringing a little bias with this question, and from entrepreneurs that I've talked to, and also to minority entrepreneurs, but it takes a lot of, I think, humility and also business sense to say, you know what, I'm not designed or ready to be CEO right now. It's time for me to move on from CEO role. It's okay to bring someone that's in to run operations. And versus what I see some entrepreneurs like, I'm the founder, I always want to be CEO, this is my company. They got to be willing to let go and kind of do what's best for the company and do what's best for the investors at the same time.
Yeah, 100% agree. So it's almost like you can have 100% of a small pie, or you can have a smaller portion of a large pie. And the same thing that goes with raising capital. Sorry. So you could raise a lot of money and get diluted, but you have a potential of creating a much more valuable company. And there's no really wrong answer. There's nothing wrong with saying I have this company and I want to, build have a more organic growth curve, right? That's entirely up to you. I mean, life isn't about optimizing for financial returns. I don't think so. So if that's a life you want, and great, do that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's so easy to get caught up in these kind of stories, and it makes it seem so real. But end of the day, it's your life, it's your decision, and if you feel like you are happy, because it gives you other things, you feel like you have control of your company, and great, do that. It's up to you. But in most cases, if you're not the right CEO and people tell you you're not the right CEO and you insist on being CEO, it's going to destroy value, I think, eventually.
Yeah. Now let's switch a little bit about talking about Nigeria and Africa. There's a lot of new interests around. I personally feel like around African markets, Nigeria. I was talking with an investor a couple of years ago, was saying, why don't we see more Silicon Valley Bay Area company investors start putting money into Africa as a resource, right? And the answer was they didn't see a lot of exit from Nigeria or Ghana or just African founded companies. I see that starting to change a lot because people start seeing it as a huge resource and opportunity, right? Do you see that as well? And what around that do you see entrepreneurship that's starting to change in Africa, in your homeland, your home area as well, your home country?
Yeah, I think the entrepreneurial space in Nigeria is really, really heating up, and there's so many companies, starting with Jumia, which is an Amazon type service focused on the West African market. There's a company called Conga, which is probably the largest competitor to Jumia. So there's lots of things going on, and because these companies are so well capitalized, they've created this really interesting phenomenon where they've essentially educated consumers on many of the things that you guys will need to, well, African entrepreneurs will need to educate. So I don't know how much they spend. I would suspect that Druby and Conga spend millions each year marketing their service. So, so that and as consumers use their service, now they get comfortable with the whole idea of e-commerce, right? So the next wave of e-commerce companies that come to Nigeria will have a much easier time because these guys have done such a great job in educating the market, right? So there are big tech hubs in Yaba, which is in Lagos, right, where these kind of tech communities are really building up. And there's a company called Andela who's doing very interesting work around training Nigerians to basically be offshore developers for U.S. companies, which I think is a wonderful idea. And I think as that know-how and that technology and the skill sets in Nigeria gets higher and much more sophisticated, now those developers now spin off and then build companies that solve local problems. Right? So it's just a really fascinating time. In that, I speak particularly of Nigeria, but I think that same dynamics is probably happening in Kenya, it's probably happening in South Africa, etc.
Yeah, great. So you was doing more, tech investments, right? But we talked outside about you doing more people investment, seems like. But still, let's talk about like markets and trends, right? Like you touched on a couple markets and trends that's happening in Nigeria, but in terms of how you see the market here in the United States and compare it, what really attracts you today? Like if there's a market where if you were to put investment dollars in, or like see entrepreneurs create this type of company, what would you put money in that today?
Yeah, so I need to sort of rebrand myself in terms of, I'm not a venture capitalist, right? So the things that I'm particularly interested in is actually investing in the ideas that I think are real and doable. So I'm still in the early stage of figuring out what the game plan is, but rather than make the entrepreneurial journey a sequential experience, right? So you start one company, you exit, you start one company, you exit, the next company you exit. My experiment is to figure out how to take the ideas I have and find some ways to create a process around turning those what I think are good ideas into good companies, right? So that involves capital, that involves smart people, that involves a process around products, right? And that's my vision, and that's my intent to be able to create such a company, because I think as much as the venture capital industry and the sort of tech industry innovates around other industries, I don't think we've done a good enough job in innovating our own industry, which is startups, right? And there might be some structural reasons why it's as bad as it is, maybe because of the outsized returns of venture capital returns, where it's okay to have 9 companies that fail because the 1 or 2 companies that do make up the returns of the fund. But as an entrepreneur, it's horrible, right? Because you lose 5, 6, 10 years of your life pursuing a concept that may not work. And as long as the VC returns are adequate, they're fine with the model. But so my vision and my focus is to figure out how can we de-risk many of those processes. How can we make the entrepreneurial process? It won't be perfect, right? There's always an element of risk. But the way I see the entrepreneurial process is that it's so filled with so many kinds of risk and so many unknowns for the entrepreneur. And I think having gone through some of these processes, I think there's a better way of structuring the entrepreneurial journey in a way that creates a greater likelihood of success for entrepreneurs, but also creates a higher chance of success for the investors who back the entrepreneurs. So that's the vision, and that's what I'm working on right now.
So basically, you want to disrupt entrepreneurship. Basically.
Well, I just feel it's just broken, and I don't know anyone who feels it works. Right? I just really don't know anyone who, like the VCs, feel like they get business plans and teams that aren't fundable. The startup entrepreneurs feel like, getting VC money is impossible, hiring people is possible, product cycles are too long, like no one's happy, right? And I just feel like that there is a better way to do this, right? And so you have accelerators and incubators who are, doing great work in terms of kind of fixing some of those problems. But I think I have a different approach, and I'm looking forward to attempting it.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to see you do it as well, because I see where I feel like. Let me ask you this question. With doing that, if you feel like you're successful, do you feel like it will impact the potential returns on investment for angels and venture capitalists? Because I think part of what we talk about entrepreneurship, everybody's not going to have a unicorn. Everybody's not going to have $1 billion valuation, right? So is it okay for an entrepreneur to create a $1 million a year business or $100,000 a year startup? Like, do you see that as being like a possible success map for entrepreneurs and investors, but just different lower returns?
Oh no, I definitely the whole idea of like shooting for lower returns is crazy. Don't do that. Still shoot. I mean, because it's work, so definitely make sure it's worth the work, right? So like when people think about if you pitch your idea to someone and it says, maybe we should really think about the market size, take it seriously, right? And because it matters, right? So it allows you to actually have the capital you need to raise to actually execute in the business, right? There's nothing worse than being underfunded and just there, right? But it's one of those things where you can just pull the plug, right? Because you've devoted 3, 4, 5, 6 years of your life to this concept, right? So it's almost like a different type of, handcuff, right? Because you don't want to leave the concept because you spend so much time, but you don't have the capital to do it. It's a really rough place. So I would say, if your idea, like, think of a big idea. There's no reason why you should think small. No, absolutely no reason. There's no reason for you not to think of, okay, what's the largest company right there that you admire and build a similar business, right? There isn't. There really is not. And I believe in the power of creativity. I believe the power of intent and passion. So if you have clarity, so I'll just quickly go through something I thought about on the way here, which is what I call the 5 C's, right? And the 5 C's, I think, are my way of kind of describing what that entrepreneurial journey is. So the first one is creativity, right? Really thinking creatively about the opportunities in front of you. That's something that's so important, right? Because the very ideas you have, right? It's almost you start off with what's possible, then you then go down. If you already limited yourself in terms of focusing on this niche or in this particular use case that isn't a big idea, then you've intentionally taken out all your value. Why don't you think as big as you can and still have clarity, which is the next C, right? So once you have those creative ideas, or you think great problems, pains in the world you want to go attack, then have clarity around it. Really talk to the customer, really understand the product, really understand exactly what you want to build. I can't emphasize that enough. What I personally do is that I typically only do things that I have a pain, right? So when I experience the pain, I then go to the process of building a company to solve the pain. In HubSpot's case, I was on a date on the Lower East Side, and I got lost, right? And I figured, well, there must be some way to figure out this problem, right? And I then went ahead and built it, and I built it for someone like me who has no sense of direction, right? So it's that intimate knowledge about the nature of your problem that allows you to translate it to a company that actually makes sense. So once you have creativity, you have clarity, the next step is really conviction, right? And you can only have conviction if you have clarity. If you have conviction without clarity, then it's really your ego talking, right? You want to build a company to build a company, which is absolutely the wrong reason to build a company. Only build a company when you're very clear as to the nature of the problem you want to solve. You have clarity from it, and because you have clarity, you can then have conviction. And the conviction allows you do the next C, which is capital. Human capital in terms of people who will join you to execute on the company, and also financial capital to invest in your concept. Then the last C is what I call, this concentrate, right? And concentrate is basically two sides. Concentrate in terms of your ability to visualize the end point, the thing you want to create. But it also means focus, right? So if you, after having clarity, you then have to then figure out, this is the pain points I want to solve. These are the people I'm solving that pain point for, and here's the product that solves that pain. And it's that simple focus and that unwavering focus on fixing and improving and fixing and improving. I think for me it seems to be the best way to approach it.
Thank you for that. The 5 C's. I hope somebody's tweeting. There's gonna be a video. We're gonna follow up with the 5 C's. That's a blog post in itself. Right? Right, for real. Let's talk about two things that, ironically, are the exact opposite, but I think is driving this Silicon Valley in the Bay Area right now. One is around unicorns in a bubble, like all in a bubble, and all these companies like AO just got acquired, or yesterday, Verizon and all that. And then so you have one group talking about unicorns in a bubble, billion-dollar valuations and VCs, and the other group is talking about diversity in tech, that they're up. So one, do you believe we're in a bubble? Because that's the question everybody asked today. And then the second part is, what solutions would you like to see to create more inclusive tech workforce and more minority tech founders?
So to answer the first one, I can't. I don't know if we're in a bubble or not. Right? And I think, when I was in financial markets, I would probably care more than I do now. But you can't really control that. So my focus is really just on doing things that I can control, and then having a sense that there's a cycle, right? And you never know where the cycle is, but just keep that in mind. So if someone offers you a great term sheet that funds you for 2-3 years, take the money, right? Because you never know where the cycle will end.
Take the money, people. Take the money.
Yeah, which is, no one knows when it'll happen, but it will happen at some point. So, you should definitely have that in your mind, but still run your business. But obviously, think about the potential downside as well. Then on the question of Black tech entrepreneurship, I think it's more your area. But I think one of the things I really want to make sure that I share with you is that it is not. It's challenging, right? But it's doable, right? And the difference between your intention to do it, right, is really kind of your mental decision to try it, right? So the way I started, right, is I started the most ridiculous ideas, right? And it just gave me comfort with the whole process, right? So it demystifies the entrepreneurial process. So if you're thinking about entrepreneurship and you're not sure of the idea you want to pursue, I would say is, at the very least, pick your best idea, and even on a part-time basis, attempt to build it, right? You're I just remember this was probably in 1996, which was when I actually started the very first company I started. The whole idea of even registering a domain was something that I just thought was difficult. I didn't know how to do it, right? So just think about that, right? So registering a domain, right? So the things you think are difficult, if you actually try it, right, you'll see that, it's not that hard, right? There's still many more challenges, but the more comfort you have, or even if you do with a team of people, I realize that many of the issues and things you think are insurmountable are indeed possible. So for me, my background is in finance, and I can't code. I still can't code, right? But that didn't stop me from doing the things I've done, and it shouldn't stop you either, right? So there are so many resources, especially for me. I always recommend a site called ELAS. It's difficult to manage, and you'll run through lots of issues, but it's worth attempting to do, right? So if you have a great idea, large markets, and work on it. But if all you have is this localized solution for your neighborhood, for your city, go ahead and do it too, right? Because you leave that process with a sense of, it's doable, I can do that, right? And I think that's such an important part in kind of demystifying the kind of entrepreneurial process.
Great, great. So last question, then we'll jump to Q&A. We're at Google, one of the most innovative companies in the world, right? So this, and Google's doing a lot of interesting things, right? It's all I'm talking about public things, right? Everything is from Project Loom to provide internet for everyone. Google Fiber. What would we like to see Google like if you was like, what would we like to see Google do, right? Like we have more impact in terms of entrepreneurship or tech or just innovation, like or there's driverless cars they're doing now. So it's all public stuff. So it's like,
well, no, why would I want Google to do it? I want to do it.
I just want to ask. Like, they didn't put me ask a question, but I'm like, I'm going to ask the question. Google, we work with Google, so I'm ask the question.
Yeah, that's a good question. But the whole idea of saying it's someone else can do it, no. Like, why can't you do it, right? There's no, I mean, there's all these resources, engineers, developers, designers, right? The powerful thing about technology, especially now that we have that so many of the processes have been taken out, right? So you have the development of Guru and Elance and all this marketplace for talent. So if you need a designer for your logo, go on Elance. If you need someone to do your wireframe, go on Elance. If you need to figure out someone to actually write code for your site, you go to Elance. If you're looking for a great way to start, right, without having to invest thousands of dollars of your own money, go on AWS. It gives you a kind of a relatively small amount of money for a server that scales with time, right? If you're looking for resources on how to actually start a company, go on YouTube, listen to videos, go to listen. Okay, there are two sites I would recommend that for those of you who are really interested in entrepreneurship, you should really literally listen to every single video that's available. First one is just Google Y Combinator, right? And the founders and read or listen to everything they've said. The other one is Michael Skoke at iLab at Harvard, and just really great way of thinking about the entrepreneurial journey. And if you really take those two authors and really try to understand, and even if you have to have focus groups and panel and small group discussions of what it means, right? Those are the things you need. You don't need anything else. You don't need to seed opportunities to anyone. You really don't.
All right. Since we got around that question, I'm gonna ask one more. I'm curious. In terms of like, I feel like we're on the verge of like a crazy technology, like advancement. Like we're starting to see like NASA work on like trying to get warp speed. We're starting to see driverless cars and drones and robots and artificial intelligence. What is the one thing you would like to see like really like advanced like that we saw in the movies that we would have like today? Like what?
Yeah. So being Nigerian, being African, I had this thought a few years ago, and maybe at some point that'll be something I'll pursue. Is imagine people talk about poverty and hunger in the emerging markets. Imagine if someone were to build a robotized farm, right, where large acres of land are farmed, tilled, harvested by solar-powered robots, right? Just think of what that does to like humanity and the surplus value that can be created from a venture like that. So that's and when I talk about the power of creativity, I really do believe that. I believe that I've never been more excited about the ability to turn an idea that you just dreamt up with into a real company. And if there is anything within you that's stopping you from thinking as large and as big and as audacious as you can, then then there's a problem. Think audaciously, but have clarity in what you do, and you'll have so much more power to be able to get the resources you need to execute on that concept.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, let's give you a hand. Give Chinedu it. Anyone has any questions? All right, I'm going to go to the lady in the back. And then you. All right, get my Phil Donahue, so my age.
Hi, I'm Lauren Williams. Can you hear me? You spoke about pain, and that your companies are created and driven by your pain or a need to solve that pain. Did the pain of building your first company ever give you pause about building another company? So I hear that you're very driven and you want us to all be fearless, and I think that's fabulous, but did you ever hesitate based on what your experience with your first company was?
I didn't hesitate because I just believe that that's what I'm supposed to do, and that's what I intend on doing. But as I said earlier, the entrepreneurial process is rough. It really is rough. But I guess my point though is, if you believe in the idea you want to manifest, right? That energy, that drive to make it happen, right, it won't entirely cover the pain of having to go through so much risk and so much uncertainty, but at the very least it'll make it worth it, right? So you may fail, right? But that's fine, because you've learned many skills and many lessons. Then you go work on the next one, right? So I think people overestimate the kind of consequences of failure, right? And then that kind of makes your decision, your decisions, it makes them irrational to some extent, right? So I feel like it's fine to fail, and you go on. And if you can deal with the mental challenges of appearing to feel like you failed, right? You just learned a really expensive lesson. That's fine. You'll make the money up in the next one. So I think that's the approach. I think that makes sense.
So standing up, I'll speak up.
Sure.
So my name is Jared. So earlier you said that you are interested in creating a company at the ground floor and exiting kind of before the scaling stage. So my question to you basically is, how did that impact your ownership percentage for your founder shares significantly included? Did you have voting rights, or were you kind of only a board observer? And let's say, for example, because you kind of exited at before the scaling phase, how did that kind of affect you when the VCs came into the picture after the angels?
Okay, so so in Tripology and HubSpot's case, nothing changed. It's really just me changing my management role. So I essentially resigned as management of the company, but the directorship and chairmanship of HubSpot was still. So nothing changed other than my role in the company. So when I say exit, so I don't want you to think of it as almost abandoning the company. No, it's almost like I'm actually creating the fuel to actually get them successful, right? So yes, yeah. So nothing changed other than my role as CEO. So the whole idea of thinking of as Wayne said, what's your skill set? What are you good at? And that decision could even come at a later stage. So imagine you're an engineer, you have a great idea, you start working on it, but you realize that for you to be able to raise capital from investors or be able to hire other teams around you, you actually need a new CEO. It makes sense, right? So it makes sense to focus on the thing you're particularly good at, right? And bring in resources or team members who can help you execute and focus on different parts. No one is a perfect CEO who's great at hiring, great at development, great at strategy, great at product, right? So you have to pick where you think you're strongest. And for me, I think I'm strongest in the ideation phase, in the sort of 2 years of really taking an idea, right, and making it a real company.
Hi, June Riley from VC Task Force. I'd like to ask you if you've used mentors and sponsors in your career, and how did you do so, and what was the outcome?
Yeah, as I mentioned, actually, that's something I've been very bad at. What I was very bad at, I'm changing that now, is that there's an enormous network of value of people who want to support you if they know what you're working on, right? And that's something that, again, I really encourage all of you to do and make it a thing, a meeting a week, a meeting a month, something that allows you to engage with mentors, etc. I didn't have the benefits of that, and I think it's something I regret.
Do you ever use sponsors?
I'm not sure what you mean by sponsors.
Mentors kind of help you understand things. It's more like a kind of a warm feeling and gets you from point A to point B. Sponsors advocate for you. They kind of lead the way, introduce you to people, say, listen to him, meet with him, he's a good guy, and so they basically.
Okay, so just more active mentorship. Yes. Okay, yes. So I think probably the closest version is that angel investor that got his corporation to give me that first kind of $50,000 kind of like bridge loan to buy more server space for HubSpot. But I think it is critical that everyone build those mentorship and sponsor relationships, and if you have people who are willing to do that, and also don't make it a one-side thing, right? Figure out how you can add value to your mentor or a sponsor as well. The one investor. I mean, he was an investor, right? So he already had kind of a real interest in my success. So, but as much as people talk about kind of it's really about the entrepreneur and really being able to ask for the things you need, be able to identify, look, I need to figure out a contact at this company. Can you help me, right? So many of these things, no one will know your business as well as you do, right? So to the extent that you know exactly what you need, and those are kind of requests you make to your network as well.
Keep it short. Okay. Aisha Bo, Start founder. Earlier, you had made a comment that the model's broken, right? I mean, if one company makes it big, then the heck with the rest of the 9. What is the one thing that you think would be the most important thing to do to reduce risk? Because you mentioned that there were several things that you would do, but you didn't say what.
So in broad strokes, like the 3 areas of risk, I think entrepreneurs or the process could be greatly improved on is, one is product, right? And a product is a very complicated thing because it's actually lots of things about markets, about segmentations, about how you build efficiently, how you build quickly. So that's a whole area of potential improvement. The other one is about people, right? So I think it is well known that the number one reason why startups fail is because of internal team dynamics, right? And so again, I feel that's an opportunity to take all we know about human relationships and about team forming, right, and apply that to the process of team building, right? So I don't see that level of discipline and that level of science involved in team building, right? It's a soft skill, but it doesn't mean that you can have a much more viable model than the whole idea of, let me go find a CTO somewhere, right? Which is, I think, how many people approach the entrepreneurial process, right? But if that team isn't tight and well functioning, and there's any hiccup to the execution of your idea, it falls apart, right? Your company falls apart. So it's not a good place. And the third area is on the capital side, right? And I think lots of things can be done on the capital side as well.
Oh, hi, Tollison Humphrey. And my question is around that team. So how do you build a team? What factors go into that in terms of your co-founders, your first employees? Then also my question around Elance. So you used Elance a lot to get your MVP out?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but those are my 2 questions. Your experience with Elance, and then the first question with how did you build your team?
So I found myself to be sort of sole founders. That's generally how I've worked with many of the ideas I've worked on. For me, that works for me. So once, because I feel like I can adequately describe what I like to do and the vision, and then and then you have a whole set of people under you. So in my mind, there are basically four elements, four key people in the execution of this consumer-facing business. So obviously, you have to have a CEO who has a very clear kind of strategic and tactical view of what needs to be done. You have a product manager who can really think about customer experiences and build a product that really resonates with consumers. The third is an engineer, right, who can actually write the code, right? And fourth is someone in marketing or business development based on the type of business you have. That, in my mind, is almost like the kind of the SEAL team of startups, right? And the logic and the composition of that team has a lot to do with your personality, your style, what's important to you, and those are things that are extremely hard to do when you meet someone at a tech meetup and you know he's an engineer and you're like, hey, let's work on an idea together. That's fine, but I feel like if that is a major source of risk, right, lots of more work can be done around thinking about how to create those combinations. It doesn't mean that one person is bad or not. It's just that there are certain dynamics that need to be there are things you need to make sure that happen, right, for teams to be successful and actually have a good working relationship. Quickly on the ELANS concept, right? So this I want to share with you at least what I think is the best way to deal with ELANS. So if you're a technical co-founder, disregard what I'm going to say. But if you're a non-technical founder, I suggest you do this. One is find a technical consultant, team member, etc., who can help you architect what you need to build, right? Because if you put your project on ELANS, lots of people will tell you, oh, I can build this for this much, but literally what they're building are just literally pages that aren't robust enough to scale. So really making sure you have the architecture well done I think is a critical part, and having someone in the US, right, who can help kind of vet that process, I think is key. The second is I would rely a lot on code repositories like GitHub, etc. And instead of hiring a team and then saying, help me build this 6-month product, right? Hire them to build a 1-week product, right? So find a way to deconstruct your MVP into really discrete elements, right? And not only hire teams with ELANS, right, but also hire individuals, right? Just ask them a few basic questions and just hire them. Don't interview them, right? And give them a task to do on your company, and you'll know if they're good or not, right? And if they're not, you've lost $100, right? And there's no systematic way. You just have to keep on doing that. And over time, you'll start building a network of 3-4 core contributors to your team, right, who can then help you build the business going forward. So that's my advice on that front.
All right, my name's Aludis Infishusi, and my question is around the failure. Did you have any failures besides the 2 successes you had with your exits? And the second question was the biggest challenges you faced, pretty much why were you, it seems like you're 2 for 2 with your companies, and that's really hard, like you said, with entrepreneurship. So what about you, made you 2 for 2 with exiting?
Okay, so the first, so I've had tons of failures, right? So, and that's why the culture around the kind of the entrepreneur is it's just driven by media, right? But there's every entrepreneur has some level of failure, and I think for me the first outright, and I wouldn't even call them failure, I would say expensive lessons, right? Was a company I wanted to start right after a business school. And the company was a company called AfriDAC, and the whole idea was to create a platform to trade financial and foreign exchange and money market securities in Africa. And so this was 2000. Internet penetration, especially among the corporations and the banks, were good enough where this platform could have worked. So we went to Nigeria, we went to South Africa. We just couldn't get the liquidity and the marketplace and adoption for it. So we lost the seed money, the investors that put into the company, and I needed to go, and that's when I went to work for the hedge fund.
Well, really want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I want to thank Sonja, Caribbean Innovation Ventures, my build-up team, Christina and Christian, Google for hosting us, Lord, Mark, the entire team, and I guess Chinedu for coming out. And so really thank you all. Thanks.